Good day to all. We are the BSED-Science student from Northwestern Mindanao State College, and today we're gonna be discussing all about central nervous system. And this is our lesson plan, and these are the member assigned per topics. Now, the first one to be discussed is the central nervous system, which will be discussed by May Rose.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to discuss about central nervous system called brain. What is brain? The brain is the largest, most complex portion of nervous system. It occurs the cranial cavity and it composed of 100 billion multipolar neurons. It controls everything in the human body and the center of nervous system. In some ways, the human brain resembles a computer, but in addition to logical processing, it capable of complex development, learning, self-awareness, emotion, and creativity. Every record of millions of chemical and electrical signals pass around the brain and the body's intricate nerve network. But nervous tissue is delicate and needs physical protection and reliability blood supply. What does the brain do? The brain helps you think, move, speak, and a lot more. It controls all organs inside your body, which includes pumping your heart and moving your muscle. The brain is the central control module of the body and coordinates activity, from physical motion to section of hormones, and creation of memory and the sensation of emotion. To carry out this function, some sections of the brain have dedicated roles. However, many higher functions reasoning, problem solving, creativity involve different areas working together in network. There are four major regions of brain: the cerebrum, the disencephalon, and cerebellum, and brainstem. Cerebrum with the cerebral cortex gives us conscious control of our actions. The disencephalon mediates sensation, manage emotions, and command whole internal systems. The cerebellum adjusts body movement, speech coordination, and balance. The brainstem relies signals from the spinal cord and directs basic internal functions and reflexes. The cerebellum is part of the brain that receives process conscious sensation generates through the controls conscious activity. It is the largest portion of the brain, which is divided into two cerebral hemispheres. Cerebral function includes conscious thoughts, memory storage and processing, sensory processing, and regulation of skeletal muscle contraction. The part of the cerebrum division is cerebral cortex. Inside the cerebral cortex, cerebral cortex is a surface of cerebrum. It's highly folded and covered with superficial layer of gray matter. This part of layer is the gray matter, and inside of the gray matter is the white matter. Under the cerebral features, there are fissure. Fissure is a deep groove. There is longitudinal fissures and transverse fissures. The transverse fissures, which divide cerebrum from cerebellum, and longitudinal features, which divide cerebrum into two. This part of here is called longitudinal features, and the transverse features, which divides the cerebrum from cerebellum. Part 2. Cerebral features, sulci or sulcus, is a shallow depression that separates the folds or wrinkle. Part of this is central sulcus and lateral sulcus. Central sulcus is a prominent sulcus that runs down the middle of the lateral surface of the brain, separating the frontal lobe from parietal lobe. This part of here is called central sulcus. The lateral sulcus or sylvianus fissure is a very deep fold seen on the lateral surface of the hemisphere, running in an anterior to posterior direction and serve to separate the temporal lobe from frontal and parietal lobe. Gyri or gyrus, elevated region that increase surface area. For central gyrus is the anatomical location of primary motor context and is responsible for control of voluntary movement. While postcentral gyrus, this region is receive various somatic sensations from body, including touch, pressure, temperature, and brain. There are 5 lobes of cerebral hemisphere: the frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal, and insula. Frontal lobe, positioned at the front of the brain. The frontal lobe contains majority of dopamine-sensitive neurons and involved in attention, reward, short-term memory, motivation, and planning. While parietal lobe integrates sensory information, includes touch, spatial awareness, and navigation. Touch stimulates from skin is ultimately sent to parietal lobe. It is also plays a part of language processing. Occipital lobe, visual processing region of the brain, housing the visual cortex. Temporal lobe, important to processing the sensory inputs, assigning in emotional meaning. The insula is under below this kanakaan, this cerebral hemisphere. Inside this is called insula. It is a small region of cerebral cortex located deep within the lateral sulcus, which is a large feature that separates frontal, parietal lobes from temporal lobes. So inside of this feature, is called insula. Gray matter. Neural cells body and unmyelinated axon. Gray matter is a home of neural cell body, axon terminals, and dendrites, as well as nerve synapses. This brain tissue is abundant in cerebrum, and brainstem. It also forms butterfly shape. So, gray matter is abundant in cerebrum, and brainstem. You can find it in the cerebrum, and brainstem. It is also formed in butterfly shape, like this one in the picture. Central butterfly shape portion of central spinal cord. The gray matter gets its gray tone from high concentration of neuronal cell bodies. White matters, however, it is myelinated axon. For example, the corpus callosum provides the major pathways for communication between 2 hemispheres of cerebral cortex. White matter's job is to conduct, process, and send nerve signals up and down of the spinal cord. The damage to the white matter of your brain spinal cord can affect your ability to move, use your sensory faculty, or react appropriately to external stimuli. Some people with damaged white matter suffers from deficits of reflective reaction. Important features of cerebrum. Since the long features was divided into two, the cerebral hemisphere, the right brain and left brain. The right brain analyzes sensory information and related body. Sensory involvement in the centers in hemisphere enable you to identify familiar objects, sight, smell, touch, or feel. Right brain individuals are often more artistic, musically inclined, and into their emotion, while left brain is skilled in important language, important in reading, writing, speaking, math, and logic. The cerebral cortex was analyzed microscopically and divided into 52 areas called Brodmann's areas, which implied with functional differences with the cortex. So this picture here is called Brodmann's areas that divided in microscopical to analyze microphysical vicinity. Motor areas of cerebral. Primary motor cortex. For central gyrus of frontal lobe, there is prime motor cortex, Broca's area, motor speech center, and frontal eyelid field. Another part of the cerebrus cortex is called sensory areas. Part of the sensory areas are somatosensory cortex, located within the partial lobe. Primary somatosources context force the post-central gyrus of parietal lobe. Neurons receive touch information, for example, temperature, pressure, vibration, pain, etc. Plasmatic sensory reception of skin from receptors in skeletal muscles. Another function of primary semester context is allowed you to interpret what body region is being stimulated. Somatosensory association area integrates and analyzes the somatic sensory inputs from primary somatosensory cortex and memories of previous experience to produce an understanding about what is being felt. Allow you to recognize the flat, round things in your pocket is a quarter. Visual cortex, located within the occipital lobe. Primary visual cortex receives light information from retina of eye, such as color, Form, texture, and movement. Visual association area integrates and analyze the visual information coming from primary visual cortex and past experience to interpret what image means. A face, a flower, a car, stop, or sign. This is what if you if the visual associate area is the one who will primary the one will be interpret the image. For example, if you ever see a flower, the visual association area will the one to interpret. Sensor areas of cerebral cortex. Auditory cortex located beneath temporal lobes. Primary auditory cortex areas control sound information from ears such as pitch, rhythm, and volume. Auditory association area integrates, analyzes information. So, sa primary auditory cortex is where the pitch, rhyme, and volume, and the auditory association area interprets what sound you hear, for example, a scream, music, fire alarm, and thunder, etc. Other sensory areas are olfactory cortex, that perception of odors or smell, which is the nose, gustatory cortex, perception of taste, the tongue, visceral sensory cortex, visceral sensory upset stomach, for example, you have an upset stomach, the blood urge to defeat it or defecate, etc. Prefrontal cortex, also called anterior observation area. It is involved with intellect, complex learning abilities, recall, and personality, necessary for abstract ideas, judgment, reasoning, planning, concern for other and upon science. Tumor in this area frequently lead to a personality disorder. General interpretive areas, also called posterior association area, part of the temporal, occipital, and parietal lobes of one hemisphere, usually the left, seamlessly integrates sensory motor information with emotion. Breakneck's area understand written and spoken language. Basal nuclei. There are islands of gray matter located deep within the white matter of the cerebrum. Inside the gray matter located in white matter is the basal nuclei. The function of this island of gray matter is to subconsciously control large automatic skeletal muscle contraction, arm swinging when you're walking, play a role in maintaining attention, and produce dopamine. Disorder of this basal nuclei result into much or too little movement as exemplified by Huntington's too much or Parkinson too little. Limbic system. The limbic system is our emotional brain. The amygdala or amygdaloid body recognize anger and fear, assess danger, elicits fear responses associated with fight or flight. So limbic system is the one who will command if you recognize anger and fear. The cingulate gyrus plays a role in expression of our emotion. Through gestures and in revolving mental conflict and frustration, the limbic system is the whole hippocampus region, which along with the amygdala plays a role in formation of memories. Deciphaloid. Deciphaloid serves as a structure and function linked between the cerebral hemisphere and rest of the central nervous system. The deciphaloid covers the cerebrum and is not visible by external examination. Deciphaloid is a region of the forebrain connected to both the midbrain part of the brainstem and the cerebrum. So this part of here, this orange colored part in the picture is called the cephalon. It is a region of forebrain connected both midbrain, the five part called midbrain, and the cerebrum. Part of the cephalon is called thalamus. It contains important rally and processing sensor for sensory emotions, sometimes called gatekeeper or relay station. Position in the center of the brain, the thalamus receives sensory motor input, relies to rest the cerebral cortex. It involves regulation consciousness, sleep, awareness, and alertness. So the thalamus is the one that involves in your regulation of consciousness, sleep, awareness, and alertness. Hypothalamus, sitting above the brain stem, roughly the 6-ton almond. So the size of the hypothalamus is about the 6-ton almond. Hypothalamus creates the number of neuromuscles and influences body temperature, controls thirst and hunger. Automatic control center influence BP, HR, GI, and motility. Body temperature regulates and initiates sweating, shivering. The third one is regulates food intake and regulates body balance, water balance through the thirst mechanism. So hypothalamus is the one that that influence the body temperature, your food intake, and other water balance through thirst mechanism. Infrathalamus, pineal gland secretes melatonin and regulates the sleep-wake cycle. Cerebellum. The cerebellum functions is to coordinate subconscious skilled muscles movements, posture, equilibrium, example, cerebellum. So if ever cerebellum is damaged, your balance will be not. Then the cerebellum is separated from cerebrum by transfer features. The cerebrum also processes called like leaf-like. This part of it is called cerebrum by the vermis. The white matter of cerebrum is called the arbor vitae and is surrounded by gray matter called like leaf-like wrinkles called folia and cerebellar cortex. So cerebrum is the one that coordinates your muscles, movement, and posture. Brainstem is another part of nervous system, another part of the brain. The brainstem connects the spinal cord to higher thinking central of the brain. Three parts of the brainstem is the pons, medulla, and midbrain. The pons help control breathing rhythm. The medulla handles respiratory direction and circulation. Reflexes such as swallowing, coughing, and sneezing. The midbrain contributes to motor control, vision, hearing, as well as vision and hearing-related reflexes. Brainstem structure. Structures. Midbrain. Purpura, quadrignigna, or four twin bodies. Superior colliculi, visual reflexes, head-eye coordination. Inferior colliculi, auditory reflexes, and startle reflexes center. Subtially nigra produce dopamine and regulates the activity of the basal nuclei of the brain. Lack of dopamine has been linked to Parkinson's disease. Pons, the bridge contains respiratory center that helps to maintain the normal rhythm of breathing in a toxic area. It helps control the breathing rhythm. Medulla oblongata. Part of this is cardiac center, controls force and rate of heart contraction. So if you have heart disease, the cardiac center, the medulla oblongata is the one that the functions of cardiac center. Vasomotor center regulates blood pressure by regulating smooth muscles of blood vessels. Respiratory center regulates the rate deep breathing and also regulates visceral reflexes such as vomiting, hiccuping, swallowing, coughing, and sneezing. Medulla also handles respiratory, digestion, and circulation reflexes, swallowing, and sneezing. Reticular activity system, or RAS, or reticular formation. It extends to the medulla oblongata, pons, and midbrain. The functions of RAS is to maintain cerebral cortical awareness, regulates consciousness. It controls brain's alertness, inhibited sleep, alcohol, tranquilizer, and also filters out repetitive or weak stimuli. That will be all. Thank you for watching and listening.
Thank you, Rose. Now we will proceed to the
Thank
topic
you.
of circulation and central nervous system. The reporters will be Callora, Diane, and Campos Ayan.
Okay, let's proceed. Circulation and the central nervous system. Meninges. The meninges are specialized membranes surrounding the brain and the spinal cord and provide physical and shock absorption. The meninges function primarily to protect and support the central nervous system, or the CNS. It connects the brain and the spinal cord to skull and spinal canal. Okay, the meninges consists of three membranes. The first, the dura mater. Second, the arachnoid mater. And the third, the pia mater. Next, so dura mater. The dura mater is the outermost layer of the meninges, and it's located directly underneath the bone of the skull and vertebral column. It is thick, tough, and extensible. The dura mater consists of two layered sheets of connective tissues. The first, periosteal layer. Periosteal layer lines the inner surface of the bone of the cranium. The second, the meningeal layer, located deep to the periosteal layer. It is continuous with the dura mater of the spinal cord. Next. So as you can see in the picture, this is the superior sagittal sinus, the dorsal venous sinuses. So ang dura mater naa siya two-layer. The still layer or the periosteal layer is the same. So as you can see, they are closely united except along a certain lines, they are separated to form venous sinuses. Next. Dorsal reflection. The meningeal layer of the dura mater folds inward upon itself to form four dorsal reflection. These reflections project into the cranial cavity, dividing it into several compartments, each of which houses a subdivision of the brain. So the four dorsal reflections, or falx cerebri, projects downward to separate the right and the left cerebral hemisphere. The next, tentorium cerebelli, separates the occipital lobes from the cerebellum, contains a space and anteromedially for passage of the midbrain. The tentorial notch. The next, falx cerebelli, separates the right and left cerebellar hemisphere, covers the hypophyseal fossa of the sphenoid bone. It contains a small opening for passage of the stalk and the pituitary gland. So, mo na siya ang the four dorsal reflection. Next. So, the third one is the arachnoid mater. The arachnoid mater is the middle layer of the meninges, lying directly underneath the dura mater. It consists of layers of connective tissue, is avascular, and does not receive any innervation. Underneath the arachnoid is a space known as the subarachnoid space. It contains cerebrospinal fluid, which act to cushion the brain. Small projection of the arachnoid mater into the dura, known as the arachnoid granulations, allow CSF to re-enter the circulation via the dorsal venous sinuses. When you say CSF, it is cerebrospinal fluid. So next, arachnoid membrane loosely covers the brain and the spinal cord and get its name from its web-like appearance. So as you can see, it looks like a web-like appearance. So next. So the last one is the pia mater. The pia mater is located underneath the subarachnoid space. It is very thin and tightly adhered to the surface of the brain and spinal cord. It is the only covering to follow the contours of the brain or degree and the fissures. Pia mater has a rich supply of blood vessels which provide nutrients to nervous system. Pia mater, covering the spinal cord, is composed of two layers. An outer layer consisting of collagen fiber and an inner layer that encases the entire spinal cord. So the next will be discussed to my partner, which is Diane Campos.
So let's talk about the ventricles. The ventricles are the open spaces within the brain where CSF or the cerebrospinal fluid circulates. The brain possesses four fluid-filled chambers. The ventricles contain CSF or the cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid circulates throughout and around the CNS or the central nervous system. CSF circulates to remove the metabolic waste. The CSF is formed by the choroid plexus. The choroid plexus is a type of specialized membrane, integrate network of capillaries. CSF is absorbed by the arachnoid villi in granulation and trabeculae. The ventricles are lined with epithelial cells which wave with their cilia to circulate the CSF or the cerebrospinal fluid. So there are four ventricles. The two lateral ventricles are deep within the cerebrum. the left and the right and left side. The third ventricle, located in the densiphallum, the space between the left and right side of the densiphallum. The fourth ventricle begins in the metacephalon and extends into the superior portion of the medulla oblongata. It is narrow and it's continuous with the central canal of the spinal cord. The third ventricle communicates with the fourth ventricle via the cerebral aqueduct. And that's all.
Now we will proceed to the topic of spinal cord that will be presented by Jessa Gomez.
So, good morning, everyone. I am Jessa Gomez, and I will be the next reporter. Okay, so I'm going to show some pictures, then you'll try to recognize them. So, kani, and this. So, as you have seen, that was our spinal cord, right? So, the central nervous system consists of two important parts of the human body. And so, it is the brain and the spinal cord, which I'm going to discuss at this moment. So what is spinal cord? As I've said earlier, it is part of the central nervous system. It is a nerve column that passes downward from the brain into the vertebral canal. If we try to touch our back, we can feel our backbone wherein our spinal cord is situated. Well, hopefully, we've learned something already about this in our elementary and high school days. So, okay, our spinal cord nerve signals our brain in our body and vice versa, meaning it sends and receives signals. These nerve signals help us to feel sensations and move our body. Whenever we feel hot or pain in our finger, the signals travels from the nerves in our finger through our spinal cord to the brain. That's why we're able to feel the sensation. So now I'm going to give a short introduction of each major region of the spinal cord. So this, the cervical spine. It supplies nerves to the shoulder and upper limbs. Example, from our head and neck, hand, wrist, diaphragm. So this is the upper part of the spinal cord. We can recognize from where it starts and to where it ends by counting the vertebrae or the bones. So cervical spine starts from here, C1 to C7, as you can see in the illustration. That one na ay mga numbers. So next, the thoracic spine. The thoracic spine, which is located in the upper and the middle part of the back. It extends from T1, as you can see here again, until T12. So next, the lumbar region, or more commonly known as our lower back. And it consists of 5 vertebrae labeled as L1 to L5. That one that has a yellow shade. It is situated or located between the thoracic or chest region of the spine and the sacrum. So next, the sacral spinal cord. It is the segments that give rise to the lower motor neurons and sensory fibers that contribute to the sciatic, pelvic, pudendal, and peroneal nerves. So as you can see, the sacral spinal cord starts from S1 to S5. Next, we have the coccygeal nerves. Coccygeal nerves. The spinal nerves, or the tailbone, the last and the smallest pair of the spinal nerves. They originate from the conua medullaris, which is the terminal segment of the spinal cord that is located in the distal part of the vertebral column. Okay, so this is called the spinal cord. It has its cervical nerves and its corresponding coverage and or areas of functions. In this part, the cervical spine and its function from this C1 to C8, as you can see here. It only functions or give functions from our hand, triceps, wrist, extenders, deltoids, biceps, diaphragm, head, and neck. And so thoracic, here it gives function to chest, muscles, abdominal muscles, and the lumbar, the legs, muscles, and the sacral, the bowel bladder, sexual functions, and so on, the coccygeal. Okay, so now we've done discussing the major part or major region of the spinal cord. So now what is cervical enlargement? It is the spinal cord expansion that corresponds to the arms, and it includes segments C1 to T1. It is the source of the spinal nerves that contribute to the branchial plexus and supply the upper limbs. So as we can see here in the illustration, this one is the cervical enlargement. It is happened in the cervical cervical spine at previous pictures. This one here. The reason of the cervical enlargement of the cervical region is because of the increased neural input and output of the upper limb. Next, we have the lumbar enlargement or lumbosacral enlargement. Also, it is a widened area of the spinal cord that gives attachment to the nerves which supply the lower limbs. Kani siya. Diri, muna siya. And then, we have the conus medullaris. It is the structure that serves to stabilize the spinal cord by connecting the conus. It is the tapering distal end of the spinal cord, consists of sacral S2 to S5 and coccygeal segments. This structure serves to stabilize the spinal cord as what I have read by connecting the conus to coccyx via the coccygeal ligament. So, next, the cauda equina. It consists of the spinal nerve roots from L2 to S5 and coccygeal nerves. The cauda equina is responsible for sensory and motor innervation to the pelvis and lower limbs, as well as bowel and bladder function. If the cauda equina is damaged by inflammation or compression in the low back, symptoms may be severe and may develop quickly. So next, the filum terminal. As you can see here in our illustration, this one, the ends, it is the fibrous. So it is a fibrous band that extends from the conus medullaris to the periosteum of the coccyx, and its functions are to fixate, stabilize, and buffer the distal spinal cord from normal and abnormal cephalic and caudal traction. Next, the posterior median sulcus. The posterior median sulcus separates the posterior portion of the cord into halves and contains a delicate layer of ia. Here, Monisha, this one is the posterior median sulcus. The posterolateral sulcus, which runs the full length of the cord, represents the entry point of posterior root sensory fibers. Next, the anterior median fissure. So this one here in the lower, anterior median fissure. It extends along the entire length of the medulla oblongata, and it ends at the lower border of the pons in a small triangular expansion, termed the foramen cecum. Its function is to provide a groove in which the entire spinal artery sits. It provides the anterior part of the spinal cord and sourced from the segmental medullary arteries and the segmental spinal arteries, which are sourced from the intercostal arteries. So next, the central canal, also known as ependymal canal. So this one here, kanisha kaning gamay, and this is also here. So the central canal is also known as ependymal canal is the cerebrospinal fluid filled space that runs through the spinal cord. The central canal lies below and is connected to the ventricular system of the brain, from which it receives cerebrospinal fluid and shares the same ependymal lining. So the spinal cord has this what we call the gray and white matter. As we have heard earlier in our first reporter, the gray and white matter is also found in the brain. She even discussed about it already. So I'm going to describe now how does it look like in our spinal cord. So what is gray matter? So the gray matter throughout the central nervous system enables individuals to control movement, memory, and emotions. So the gray matter is the center cord of the spinal cord and is shaped like a butterfly, and it consists of cell bodies of interneurons and motor neurons, as well as neuroglia cells and unmyelinated axons. And it enables individuals, to control movement, memory, and emotion. So now the gray matter is divided into regions that are referred to as horn. So first, we have this posterior horn, and responsible for sensory processing. The anterior horn sends out motor signals to the skeletal muscles. The lateral horn, which is the central component of sympathetic division of autonomic nervous system. Okay, so this one is the gray matter and its parts, or the horn. Okay, so next, we have the white matter. Okay, the white matter appears pinkish white and consists of axons, myelin, and plays a key role in nerve cells' ability to connect to one another. So it is divided into two tracks, the ascending and descending tracks. So what does it mean by ascending tracks? So ascending tracks carry sensory information from the body, like pain, for example, up to the spinal cord to the brain. And then the descending tracks carry motor information like instructions to move the arm from the brain down the spinal cord to the body. Also, the descending tracts are the pathways by which motor signals are sent from the brain to the spinal cord. They are also called motor tracts due to their involvement in movement coordination. These tracts can be classified by their structural arrangement into lateral and medial tracts. So here, this one is the white matter and its parts, the columns. We have the posterior dorsal columns, the lateral columns, and the anterior columns. So next, we have the dorsal root, which means it is one of two roots which emerge from the spinal cord. It emerges directly from spinal cord and travel to the dorsal root ganglion. So what is the function of dorsal root? The dorsal roots carry sensory neural signals to the central nervous system. From the peripheral nervous system, the dorsal root ganglion has a significant clinical application, particularly in its association with neuropathic pain. So Monisha, this one is the dorsal root. This one that has blue color, the dorsal root. So next. Okay, so as the dorsal root emerges from intervertebral neural foramina, it forms the dorsal root ganglion. It is a group of cell bodies responsible for the transmission of sensory messages from receptors such as thermoreceptors, nociceptors, proprioceptors, and chemoreceptors to the central nervous system for a response. The dorsal root ganglion contains cell bodies for sensory nerves that carry sensory information to the spinal cord. So now the ventral root, this one here. So the ventral root carries motor information from the spinal cord to the rest of the body and leaves from the anterior side of the cord. So next, the sensory neurons. Sensory neurons are the nerve cells that are activated by sensory input from the environment. And it is also deliver electrical signals from the outer parts of the body. For example, when you touch a hot surface with your fingertips, the sensory neurons will be the ones firing and sending off signals to the rest of the nervous system about information they have received. So sensory neurons, as what I have said, delivers electrical signals from the outer parts of the body, the glands, muscles, skins, into our central nervous system. So sensory neurons is for senses, and the motor neurons is for our movement. Motor neurons are neurons that carry information from the brain or spinal cord to regulate activity in muscles or glands. It carries signals from our central nervous system to the outside parts of the body. So the sensory fibers enter the central through the dorsal root, here, dorsal root, and the motor fibers exit the central nervous system through the ventral root, here. So that's all for now for the spinal cord. I hope you learned something of what I discussed, and now we can move on to the next topic with the next reporter. Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation, Jessa. Now we will proceed to peripheral nervous system, which is our last topic, and it will be reported by me and my partner, Judelyn, Mahinay.
Okay, we have the peripheral nervous system. So what is peripheral nervous system? Peripheral nervous system consists of nerves that branch out from the brain and spinal cord. These nerves form the communication network between the CNS and the body parts. The peripheral nervous system is further subdivided into the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. The primary role of the PNS is to connect the CNS to the organs, limbs, and skin. The peripheral nervous system is divided into two main parts. It is the autonomic nervous system that controls involuntary bodily function and regulates gland. Autonomic nervous system consists of nerves that connect the CNS to the visceral organs, such as the heart, stomach, and intestines. It mediates unconscious activities. The somatic nervous system consists of nerves that go to the skin and muscles and is involved in conscious activities. Next. So peripheral nervous system consists of cranial nerves and spinal nerves. So cranial nerves sends electrical signals between your brain, face, neck, and torso. Your cranial nerves help you taste, smell, hear, and feel sensations. They also help you make facial expressions, blink your eyes, and move your tongue. The peripheral nervous system is the division of the nervous system containing all the nerves that lie outside of the central nervous system. The primary role of the PNS is to connect the CNS to the organs, limbs, and skin. The cranial nerves begin towards the back of your brain. They are a key part of your nervous system. So there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Each pair of nerves is classified as either sensory, containing sensory neurons only, motor, containing motor neurons only, or mixed, containing both sensory and motor neurons. For each of the 12 cranial nerves, be sure you can name number, describe the function, identify if it is sensory, motor, or mixed. So we have the first cranial nerve. It is the olfactory nerves. What is olfactory nerves? It is purely a sensory nerve that functions for the sense of smell. It divides into two branches. It is the lateral olfactory nerve located in the superior nasal concha and the medial olfactory nerves located along the nasal septum. What happens when the olfactory nerves is damaged? So the joy of eating and drinking may be lost and depression may result. Furthermore, there are dangers associated with the loss of smell, including the inability to detect leaking gas or spoiled food. The next one is the optic nerve. So what is optic nerve? Optic nerve is a bundle of nerve fibers that serves as the communication cable between your eyes and your brain. It is also known as the second cranial nerve or cranial nerve 2. It transmits sensory information for vision in the form of electrical impulses from the eye to the brain. Next is the oculomotor nerve. The oculomotor nerve is the third cranial nerve or CN3. It allows movement of the eye muscles, construction of the pupil, focusing the eyes, and the possession of the upper eyelid. Cranial nerve 3 works with other cranial nerves to control eye movements and support sensory function. Next is the trochlear nerve. Trochlear nerve is one of the 12 sets of cranial nerves. It enables movement in the eye superior oblique muscles. This makes it possible to look down the nerve, also enables you to move your eyes toward your nose or away from it. It also helps pull the eye outward when the eye is looking downward. Next is, the fifth one is the trigeminal nerve. The trigeminal nerve is the part of the nervous system responsible for sending pain, touch, and temperature sensations from your face to your brain. It's a large three-part nerve in your head that provides sensation. One section, called the mandibular nerve, involves motor function to help you chew and swallow. Next is the abducens. So it is a six-paired cranial nerve. It has purely somatic motor function, providing innervation to the lateral rectus muscle. Abducens nerve arises from the abducens nucleus in the pons and of the brainstem. It exists the brainstem at the junction of the pons and the medulla. The seventh one is the facial nerve. Facial nerve controls the muscle that help you smile, frown, wrinkle your nose, and raise your eyebrows and forehead. This seventh cranial nerve performs motor and sensory functions. The main function of each of the seven cranial nerves is facial movement in the same side. The eighth one is the vestibulocochlear nerve, also called auditory nerve. Acoustic nerve or eighth cranial nerve in the human ears, serving the organs of equilibrium and of hearing. Its cochlear branch is responsible for the spatial sensation of hearing, and its vestibular portions are involved in balance, spatial sensations, and posture. The ninth one is the glossopharyngeal nerve. It is the ninth cranial nerve, or CN9. It is one of the four cranial nerves that has sensory, motor, and parasympathetic functions. It originates from the medulla oblongata and terminates in the pharynx. It is a mixed nerve that consists both of the motor and sensory fibers that rise from its nuclei. The tenth one is the vagus nerve, also called the pneumogastric nerve. It's responsible for various internal organs functions, including digestion, heart rate, breathing, cardiovascular activity, and reflex actions such as coughing, sneezing, swallowing, and vomiting. It plays a role in autonomic nervous system, which controls actions people do unconsciously, such as breathing and digestion. It may also form a link between the gut and the brain, playing a role in what scientists call the gut-brain axis. The word vagus means wandering in Latin. This is a very appropriate name as the vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve. It runs from the brain stem to part of the colon. Next one is the accessory nerve. Accessory nerve provides motor function or movement to two muscles essential to neck and shoulder movement: the sternocleidomastoid or SCM and the trapezius, as well as to the larynx or voice box and other structures in the throat. It is the 11th of the 12 cranial nerves and is often referred to as CN11. The last one is the hypoglossal nerve. Hypoglossal nerves enable tongue movement. It controls the hypoglossus and intrinsic genioglossus and styloglossus muscles. These muscles help you speak, swallow, and move substance around in your mouth. It is one of 12 cranial nerves. It also known as the 12 cranial nerve or cranial nerve 12. This nerve starts at the base of your brain. It travels down your neck and branches out, ending at the base and underside of your tongue. Cranial nerve 12 controls the genioglossus muscles, which push the tongue forward. Hypoglossus muscles that pull the tongue back and flatten it. Intrinsic muscles that change the tongue shape, including craving and narrowing. Styloglossus muscles which move the tongue up and down. So as you can see in this figure, these are the part of the cranial nerve. From 1 to 12 part of cranial nerve.
Thank you, Ate Judelyn. Now it is my turn. Now we will be tackling about spinal nerves. Last reporter, Ate Jessa, have explained very well about the spinal cord. Now I will be explaining the anatomy and the function of the spinal nerves. So the spinal nerves are designed similarly to the design of muscles. So the spinal nerve is composed of bundle that is called fascicles. These fascicles is composed of numerous cells known as neurons, as you can see here, kaning mga tiny dots may eye. So the entire nerve is surrounded by the outer layer called epineuron, and it also have middle layer, and each fascicle is wrapped in perineuron, which is the middle layer, and the neuron is also surrounded by an inner layer called indineuron. So the spinal nerve is a mixed nerve which carries So the spinal nerve is a mixed nerve which carries motor, sensory, and autonomic signals between the spinal cord and the body. In the human body, the spinal nerves are peripheral nerves that transmit messages between the spinal cord and the rest of the body, including muscles, skin, and internal organs. Each spinal nerve is dedicated to certain region of the body. So the structure of the spinal nerves are relatively large nerves that are formed by merging of sensory nerve root and motor nerve root. These nerve root emerge directly from the spinal cord, sensory nerve root from the back of the spinal cord, and the motor nerve root from the front of the spinal cord. As they join, they form the spinal nerves on the side of the spinal cord. The spinal nerves receive sensory messages from tiny nerves located in areas such as skin, internal organs, and bones. The spinal nerves send sensory message to the sensory roots, then to sensory fiber in the posterior or dorsal part of the spinal cord. The motor roots receive nerves message from the anterior or the ventral part of the spinal cord and send the nerves messages to the spinal nerves and eventually to small nerve branches that activate the muscles in the arm, legs, and other areas of the body. So, as I said ganina, in the human body, there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves, one of each side of the vertebrate column. So there are 4 principal plexuses, a blend of network nerve fibers from several spinal roots. Now these are grouped into corresponding cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal region of the spine. This was thoroughly discussed by Ate Jessa. There are 8 pairs of cervical nerves, 12 pairs of thoracic nerves, 5 pairs of lumbar nerves, 5 pairs of sacral nerves, and 1 pair of coccygeal nerves. Now let's dive in more in details about these 4 principal plexuses. So we'll start off with cervical plexuses. Cervical plexus consists of ventral rami spinal nerves, mostly continuous nerves that supply the skin. It is a few innervate muscles of the anterior neck and the pharynx, a single most important cervical nerve that innervates the diaphragm for breathing. So the function of the cervical plexus is to provide skeletal muscle control of the neck and upper torso, as well as providing continuous sensation to parts of occiput, neck, and shoulder. The greater occipital nerves originates from the spinal. The second cervical nerves is dependent of the cervical plexus. Now let's move on to brachial plexus. Now the brachial plexus innervates the pectoral girdle and upper limbs, which contributes from the ventral rami of the spinal nerve C4 to T1. So the radial nerves, as you can see here, this is the radial nerves, is the largest branch of the brachial plexus, and it produces elbow extension, forearm suspension, wrist and finger extension, and thumb abduction. Now the ulnar nerves here in the bottom produce the wrist and finger flexion and abduction, as well as abduction in the medial finger. Now in the median nerve, pronates the forearm, flexes the wrist, fingers, and opposes the thumb. Now the axillary nerves abducts arms. Lastly, musculocutaneous nerves flexes shoulders and flexes and supinates forearm. Now, the brachial plexus is a network of nerves in shoulders that carries movement and sensory signals from the spinal cord to the arm and hand. Typically, if brachial plexus injuries typically stem from trauma to the neck and can cause pain, weakness, and numbness in arm and hand. Now let's move on to the thoracic region. The thoracic region does not form a plexus. None of the intercostal nerves intertwine. So it has 12 pairs of intercostal nerves that give rise to many cutaneous branches to the chest and torso areas and innervates the external intercostal muscles for breathing. So thoracic or the mid-back, the main function of the thoracic spine is to hold the rib cage and protect the heart and lungs and the 12 thoracic vertebrae number to T1 to T12. The range of the motion in the thoracic spine is limited. Second to the last is lumbar plexus. Lumbar plexus innervates the pelvic girdle and portions of lower limbs. The lumbar plexus, as you can see here, kanang ko nila, arises by the spinal nerves T12 to L4. The femoral nerves is the largest thermal nerves in the plexus and innervates the anterior muscles of the tight or tight flexors and knee extensors. Lastly, the obturator nerves innervates the abductor muscles of the leg. So the principal function of lumbar plexus is to supply motor sensory innervation to interior compartment of the thigh. The nerve exits the plexus and enters the femoral triangle, passing just lateral to the femoral artery. Lastly, is the sacral plexus. The sacral plexus arises from the spinal nerve L4 to S4. The largest branch of the sacral flexor is the static nerve, which supplies the entire lower limb or the leg, except the anteromedial thigh. The sciatic nerve is the thickest and the longest nerves in the body and branches to form the tibial nerves and the common fibular nerves. The tibial nerves is a flexors of a knee and extensor of the ankle, flexor of the toes, and plantar surface of the foot. While the common fibular nerves, aka common peroneal, is a bicep femoris muscle, tibials and tibialis anterior muscles, extensor of the toes, surface of the legs, and dorsal surface of the foot. Now, the sacral plexus is a nerve plexus that provides motor and sensory nerves for the posterior thigh, most of the lower leg, or the entire foot, and parts of the pelvis, as you can see here in the image. Now, so that was the end of my discussion about the cranial nerves. Now I will be showing you the test that will be needed to be answered by the other group. Now I hope that we all learn. You can answer this. It's very simple, and I hope that we have discussed thoroughly. I hope that you understand our discussion, and thank you for listening. And let us all thank our brain for its wonderful gift and function it has given to us. That's all, and thank you.